Welcome to the Logistics Point interviews. Today I'm joined by Lucy Hudson, who is the Transport for the North Principal Policy Officer for Freight and Logistics. And we're going to talk about how the Transport for the North is planning their strategy for the freight industry. And also they wish to reach as many logistics companies as possible. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
I think that the first thing I would like to start with is when we're looking specifically in the area of the north of England, what are the problems for freight companies there and for the freight industry from your point of view?
Well, I think the three main kind of barriers at the moment, I think we've tried to focus on within our strategy. So we've got decarbonisation. So that's a massive challenge at the moment because we've got targets to reach net zero by certain years for different regions are setting different targets. We've got TfN's agreed target and people want to get to net zero by 2050. So I think that transport by its very nature is a very high contributor to the carbon footprint of any kind of economy. When you think about decarbonising cars and you think I'm moving to electric vehicles, the technology is moving at pace there, and you see electric vehicles around now, which is good. In terms of freight and logistics, when you think about road vehicles, getting a 37-ton lorry, as an electric lorry, to drive a distance that it needs to drive, is very challenging because the batteries need to be huge. Now, luckily, Tesco's and I've got two vehicles that they're running on a 60-mile loop that can do 100 miles range, and they're trialing those in Wales. But they're just sort of doing shuttles between a depot and a distribution centre. So they're kind of working, but it's emerging technology, so which is really, really exciting. So that's a good starting point. But if you're going to decarbonise a huge fleet of massive big lorries, that's going to take a lot longer because of the mileage you need to achieve. If you want for the railways, we've only got 10% of the network electrified at the moment, so you need to be able to electrify more of the rail network to be able to use more electric trains, and then you will be able to do if you put a load of containers on a full train, you save 76% on the carbon footprint just by moving stuff from the road to the railway, which is fantastic. But then you also have to consider the first and last mile connectivity too. So they're the kind of main challenges for the decarbonisation. Moving big and heavy things is really hard work sometimes. Vans are easier, but then they're the kind of challenges for decarb. Also, we need to look at warehousing, how that's planned. At the moment, that the local authorities can kind of secure pockets of lands that they know that they're going to be for warehousing. But if you could do that on a wider geographical scale, that would be very helpful. So that's quite a challenge because there's currently not enough warehousing. So where do you put it, and how do you make sure that the warehouse is in the right place for the right style of retail and the style of logistic use that you're going to get out of it? So that's the sort of second big problem. And then the third problem from a local authority perspective, but also an industry perspective, is data sharing. So people have very kind of quite insular about this is our data because it's going to have a commercial aspect to it. We want to keep it close to our chest. But if you think a bit more widely, you think if we shared that in a kind of oblique way where it can be cleansed and it can't be attributed to a certain company, then that'd be helpful. On top of that, you've got your Brexits and you've got your COVID-19 pandemic, and which are quite significant economic shocks. Now we talk about those as short-term economic shocks, but they have a massive impact, especially on the number of drivers available, especially because that's also an aging workforce, and then you get people isolating as well. So it makes delivery and planning that logistics activity very difficult. So they're kind of the three big ones, but then the two shorter term ones alongside.
And why do we need a more localized approach rather than just leave it to the central government to decide the whole strategy for the country?
I think it's how I've always felt is the further you are away from London, the much more difficult it is to understand the specific challenges to a certain area. So when you go to London, you see the infrastructure works. You've got significant. You've got Transport for London. You've got all the right infrastructure to make London work, and people think that's how the rest of the country works. We've got buses, we've got trains, and actually, to unless you live and work and do things within in a geography that isn't London, there are different challenges. So we need to connect economic centres. Well, that means quite a long journey when you're not in a city, and you've got to go city to city, or you've got to go from like a warehousing cluster to a port, or a depot to a port, or a consolidation centre where you're doing different activities. And all of those things need to be planned in carefully to work together to kind of make the North what it is. And it's much more difficult to think about that if you haven't got the direct experience of living within that geography.
Hey there. Thank you for watching. We will continue with the interview shortly. But before that, if you like what you see, don't forget to give us a like, comment, and you can also subscribe to our newsletters both on LinkedIn and on our website to learn more from the logistics and supply chain industry. And now, let's get back to it.
And you just mentioned also the word strategy. You published a draft strategy. What are the main points in it?
The main points, well, so I've already covered this sort of challenges about decarbonisation, about the data, and about the warehousing. So those are the three kind of areas that we focus on about the recommendations about what we can do in the future. So with the warehousing, we would want to work with the DFT because they have people who work for the Department for Transport have said to us that it's really difficult to know how to look at some of these issues on a more geographical basis. So looking at planning, you don't just want to do it in isolation on a small authority basis. But if there's an organisation that can look at the spatial planning on a slightly wider scale and say, actually, these are areas where you could put additional warehousing, or you could put additional railheads. You can do different things with the infrastructure because they've got a different kind of geographical view of that. That would be really helpful. So that's one of the reasons why we've put warehousing and that intelligence around that within the strategy. And then, of course, we have a decarbonisation strategy, so that is really important. So we've included that element of freight within our freight and logistics activity as well. And then the data, because if we can build better business cases, we can also strengthen the North case for change. So if you can say that by investing in infrastructure to enhance connectivity for heavy goods vehicles or rail connectivity, and you can make those journeys that for imports and exports more easily accessible to the ports, to the south, to whichever port they're going to or whichever destination they're going to, and you include that within all the mathematics behind how you would get a scheme or a program approved through the government mechanism, then that will actually help, because a lot of the time you're looking at sort of smaller scale journeys which suit southern areas more than the north. So to get the data working about land use, about the transport use, about the road use, about railways and freight and logistics, all kind of working together, but on a common approach that suits more people, that's very powerful.
And you're looking also now at logistics, freight, supply chain companies, and for their input in your strategy. So what are you actually looking from them, and how they can take part in it?
So so we're looking. So there's so we've got a consultation out at the moment. So anybody at the moment, it's anybody. You can have a look. I mean, if you've got expertise in the area, it's always good to hear people who've got direct experience. But also people who look out the window and think, oh, there's vans and stuff going around. They could do that in a much better way. Our high street doesn't work particularly well, so we could do something different. Tell us anything that you need to that struck something within your mind that you might want to think, oh, actually somebody could have a look at that, and we'll see if we can include those elements and ideas within our strategy. So if you go to our transportforthenorth.com, our website, we've got freight and logistics quite highlighted at the moment because we've got the consultation open. There's different ways. You can either, if you're a person who loves sort of sitting with a document and ploughing through it section by section, do that. We'll have a link to the main document, but we have set up a very interactive, as much as I can do it in a pandemic, we've got a virtual room. So you've got a room of consultation room set up where you've got different banners. So if you're just interested in looking at infrastructure, you can just look at the infrastructure and answer some sort of clicky questions for that. Or you could look at decarbonisation, or you could look at why would we need a strategy for the North. Well, many different elements of the strategy have been broken down. So you can just, boil in the kettle, have a quick look on your phone and answer some questions for us, and that'd be fine. It's all the anything, if you answer one question or all the questions, it's going to be really helpful if you want to sort of help us shape the freight and logistics sector within the north of England.
And what happens after that, after you collect all of these responses? What are the next steps?
The next steps, well, I'll work with our consultation team, and they will have a look at everything we've all said, and then try and pull out the kind of the changes to be made. We'll make those changes and listen to all the views that we've heard, which is good. And then we will, once we've got the finalised strategy, we'll take it back to our Transport for the North board. And hopefully they agree that, and they say, oh, yes, well done. Thank you very much for listening to all the consultation. And we agree with what you've come up with. And once they've signed it off, the recommendations then will form what we do in the future around the different activities that we've spoken about today. So there'll be an action plan and a kind of work programme that falls out of that, that shows how we as Transport for the North are implementing what we set out, what we consulted on, and then what people are expecting us to deliver against. So it'll be nice and easy for people to see how we get on with what we're doing.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And for everyone watching, you can find the link to the consultation below, as well as on our website. Lucy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye.